The first thing I noticed was the silence. No hiss in the pipes, no rattle in the walls, nothing. I turned the kitchen faucet again, harder this time, like somehow attitude alone was going to force water out of it. But all I got was a dry metallic cough and the sound of my old farmhouse settling around me. I remember standing there in muddy work boots after a 14-hour trucking run from Tulsa, staring at that sink while my dog Ranger sat by the door, watching me like even he knew something was wrong. Then I saw the paper taped to the back window. Bright orange. Official looking. Real smug energy coming off that thing. Unauthorized private water source has been permanently decommissioned under revised municipal compliance code. Permanently decommissioned. Funny way to say somebody destroyed my family's well while I was out earning a living. I walked down into the basement thinking maybe a line burst or the pressure switch died. But the second I opened that old utility hatch, my stomach dropped. Solid gray concrete. They filled the entire casing from top to bottom like they were burying a body. My grandfather dug that well in 1934 during the Dust Bowl years, by hand, rope and bucket style, because there wasn't money for machinery back then. He hit water after 6 days and supposedly cried right there in the dirt because it meant the family wouldn't have to leave the land. My dad drank from that well. I drank from it. Every year the county tested it, cleaner than city water every single time. But apparently now it was suddenly a health concern because the new subdivision over the hill didn't like looking at an independent property sitting in the middle of their manicured little kingdom. See, about 8 years earlier, developers rolled into our county and built this place called Silver Creek Estates. Fake luxury homes packed together so tight you could hear your neighbor sneeze through drywall, all with matching mailboxes, matching lawns, matching SUVs parked in matching driveways. Sprinklers ran twice a day, even during drought warnings. Decorative fountains bubbled nonstop out front like Caesar himself lived there. Meanwhile, I had 6 acres, a vegetable garden, chickens, solar panels, and a deep artesian well older than most of their marriages. And that bothered people, especially the HOA president, Denise Holloway. Denise had that polished corporate smile that never reached her eyes, the kind of woman who says community values right before ruining somebody's week. She'd been after me for years. Said my old barn lowered property values. Said my firewood stacks looked rural. Lady, we live in rural Missouri. But folks like Denise move out to the country, then get angry when they discover country stuff still exists. About 6 months before all this, she came to my fence personally, high heels sinking into the mud while she held a clipboard like it was a weapon. Mr. Mercer, she said, the board has concerns regarding your unauthorized water infrastructure. Unauthorized. I almost laughed in her face. That well's older than your entire subdivision, I told her. She gave me that tight little smile again. Progress requires modernization. That sentence right there told me everything about her. To people like Denise, independence feels offensive. If they can't control it, regulate it, or charge monthly fees for it, then it shouldn't exist. I figured it was just another HOA threat letter, another power trip from bored retirees with too much authority and not enough hobbies. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The next morning I drove straight into town and tracked down the concrete company listed on the service sticker near my well cap. Tiny office behind a feed store, smelled like cigarettes and diesel fuel. The foreman looked nervous the second I walked in. Big guy named Rick Talbot, probably mid-50s, hands rough as gravel. I asked him one question, who authorized the pour? He sighed like he already regretted taking the job. Look, man, the HOA board said the county approved it. Told us it was a contamination risk. Did you verify any of that? He looked down at his coffee. That told me enough. Then he said the sentence that flipped a switch in my brain. Honestly, they figured you'd just connect to municipal water and move on. Move on. Like they smashed a mailbox instead of destroying a 3-generation water source. I walked out of there shaking with anger, so hard I could barely get my keys into the ignition. And that's when I noticed it. Right across the pasture line behind my property, the sewage lift station. Small concrete building, chain link fence around it, low electrical hum coming from inside. Most people ignored it because sewage infrastructure only matters when it stops working. But I knew exactly what sat in that building because 20 years earlier, before Silver Creek Estates even existed, county engineers came knocking on my door needing land for a regional wastewater pump station. My property sat at the lowest elevation in the valley, perfect for gravity-fed sewage collection. They signed a lease agreement with me, generous monthly payment, full access rights retained by property owner, county maintenance responsibility. At the time, it seemed harmless. Tiny little utility structure in the far pasture, barely noticeable. But standing there that afternoon with concrete dust still stuck to my boots, I suddenly realized something beautiful. Every toilet in Silver Creek Estates, every shower drain, every garbage disposal, every rich family dinner flushed down every overpriced bathroom in that entire neighborhood flowed through my land first. And more importantly, the master disconnect panel for the entire lift station sat behind a lock that belonged to me. I remember staring at that humming building while the sun dropped low over the pasture and thinking something my grandfather used to say: never corner a man who already knows how to survive without you. Denise thought she buried my independence under concrete. What she actually did was start a war over plumbing. Now, before I tell you what happened next, you gotta understand something about HOAs and little power structures like this, because people from outside these neighborhoods always assume somebody in authority must know what they're doing. That's the psychological trap. Folks see clipboards, legal language, official notices taped to doors, and they automatically think, well, I guess they can do that. No, not always. Not even close. According to standard procedure, an HOA usually has authority over properties that voluntarily join the association under legally recorded covenants. But once they start stepping outside those boundaries, especially touching utility systems, private land access, or grandfathered infrastructure, things get dangerous real fast. And from a legal perspective, destroying a functioning private well without proper court authorization, environmental review, or verified county enforcement opens the door to property damage claims, utility interference claims, and in some states, straight-up civil liability that can bankrupt a board if insurance refuses coverage. But here's the deeper thing nobody talks about. People like Denise don't actually believe rules apply equally. They believe rules are tools. If the neighborhood agrees with them, they feel morally justified pushing farther and farther until somebody finally pushes back harder. That's why HOA conflicts escalate so fast. It stops being about grass height or water permits and turns into social dominance. Who controls the environment? Who gets pressured into compliance? Who folds first? The lesson here is, never assume quiet people are powerless just because they live simply. Some of the most dangerous leverage in the world belongs to folks nobody pays attention to until systems start breaking. And trust me, Silver Creek Estates was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, poured myself a black coffee, and walked out across the pasture while fog still hung low over the grass. The whole valley was quiet except for crickets and the distant hum of traffic off Route 16. I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked, which made what I was about to do feel almost ridiculous. But every time I pictured that well filled with concrete, that orange notice on my door, my patience disappeared all over again. I unlocked the gate to the lift station, stepped inside, and there it was, the master disconnect mounted beside the pump controls. Big red handle. Industrial grade. One pull and gravity would start winning every argument in Silver Creek Estates. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, just listening to the pumps moving thousands of gallons beneath the ground, listening to the heartbeat of that entire neighborhood. Then I shut it off. The hum died instantly. Silence. I removed the disconnect handle, slid it into my jacket pocket, locked the station back up, and walked home like nothing happened. At first, nothing really changed. That's the thing about sewage systems. Failure takes time. Pipes fill slowly. Pressure builds quietly. People keep flushing because they assume somebody else's problem is happening somewhere else. Around noon, my phone started buzzing. County maintenance crews couldn't remotely access the station. By 2 o'clock, Silver Creek community pages online were exploding. Anybody else's shower draining slow? Toilets bubbling? Sewage smell near Cedar Lane? By dinner time, chaos. Raw wastewater started backing into lower-level homes first. Bathtubs gurgled. Kitchen sinks burped gray water. One lady posted a video screaming because brown sludge came up through her guest bathroom shower while her kids were brushing their teeth. And honestly, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my beer. Then came the smell. Dear Lord, the smell. You gotta understand, these upscale suburban developments are designed around appearances. Clean sidewalks, lemon-scented clubhouses, HOA newsletters about pet waste etiquette. But sewage doesn't care about appearances. By sunset, a humid cloud of sewer gas hung over Silver Creek like judgment from heaven itself. People walked outside in designer athleisure, holding shirts over their noses while plumbers crawled around desperately opening access points. Every contractor found the same thing. Individual houses were fine. The failure was systemic. And systemic problems terrify suburban communities because nobody knows who to blame at first. Day 2 hit harder. The county club restaurant shut down after grease traps overflowed into the kitchen floor drains. The neighborhood gym closed. Portable toilets started appearing near the main entrance like some kind of disaster relief zone. Residents drove 15, 20 miles just to use gas station bathrooms. Meanwhile, Denise Holloway was apparently losing her mind behind the scenes. I heard later she held 3 emergency HOA meetings in one day and spent most of them screaming at utility crews who technically worked for the county, not her. By that afternoon, 2 county inspectors and a sheriff's deputy rolled up my driveway. I met them on the porch drinking sweet tea. One inspector explained there was an urgent need to access the lift station immediately. I asked if they had a warrant. Silence. The deputy shifted awkwardly. Then he said, "Mr. Mercer, people are dealing with a public sanitation emergency." I nodded. Funny how emergencies matter now. The older inspector tried a softer approach. "Look, we understand there's some dispute with the HOA." Dispute. I cut him off. "They destroyed my water supply while I was out of town." That shut everybody up for a second. Then I handed them copies of my property deed, the original lift station lease agreement, and photos of the well packed solid with concrete. The deputy looked at the pictures and muttered, "Jesus Christ, exactly." According to that lease, access rights required landowner cooperation except under declared county emergency authority, and apparently nobody wanted to officially declare an emergency, because then lawyers and reporters start asking expensive questions. So there we all stood, them needing the pumps turned back on, me standing there with years of frustration boiling under my skin, and the whole subdivision slowly drowning in its own arrogance. By day 3, Silver Creek looked post-apocalyptic. Sewage water seeped from storm drains onto pristine sidewalks. Manhole covers rattled under pressure. Flies everywhere. News vans lined the entrance road because apparently rich people losing plumbing makes excellent television. One local anchor called it Missouri's nastiest infrastructure crisis of the summer. Social media gave it a better name, the Silver Creek storm. Even I had to admit that one was pretty good. Around noon, Denise finally came to my house personally. She wasn't wearing heels anymore. Mud covered the bottom of her slacks, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. 3 HOA board members followed behind her carrying folders and trying not to gag from the smell drifting across the valley. Denise marched onto my porch and immediately switched into corporate crisis mode. "Mr. Mercer, we need to resolve this situation maturely." Maturely? I almost admired the audacity. Did maturity cross your mind when you buried my well? Her jaw tightened. The board acted under revised municipal guidance. "Show me the court order." Silence. "Show me the environmental hazard report." More silence. One of the board members finally snapped and yelled, "People are suffering." I leaned back in my chair. So am I. That's the moment they realized they had completely misjudged me. See, they thought I was some isolated country guy who'd fold the second official pressure showed up. But pressure only works on people afraid of inconvenience. I grew up fixing broken machinery with baling wire and duct tape. I've lived through tornado outages, drought years, crop failures. I can survive discomfort a whole lot longer than suburban people addicted to convenience. Denise finally dropped the fake smile completely. "What do you want?" There it was. The real negotiation. I handed her a folder I'd prepared the night before. Inside was everything. Full replacement of the artesian while using professional drilling contractors. Industrial-grade filtration system. Written exemption from all future municipal water mandates. Compensation for property destruction. Legal fees covered. And a brand new lease agreement for the sewage lift station. Triple monthly rate. 10 years prepaid up front. One board member nearly choked reading the number. "This is extortion." "No," I said calmly. "This is infrastructure pricing." They threatened lawsuits. I reminded them discovery works both ways. They threatened county intervention. I reminded them county officials really wouldn't enjoy explaining illegal destruction of private utilities on local news. They threatened criminal charges. I pointed out I had never damaged county property. I simply declined voluntary access to infrastructure located on my own land under a valid lease agreement. From a legal perspective, it was ugly gray territory. And gray territory favors whoever can endure pressure longest. So I waited. Day 4 became day 6. Day 6 became week 2. Property values in Silver Creek started collapsing in real time. Home showings got canceled because buyers could literally smell the neighborhood before turning into it. One family reportedly checked into a hotel 40 miles away because sewage backed into both bathrooms at once. The HOA burned through emergency funds renting portable sanitation trailers. Everybody blamed Denise. Residents screamed during emergency meetings. People who once argued over mailbox paint colors were now fist-fighting over functioning toilets. It was incredible. By week 3, the county quietly entered negotiations because now everybody wanted this nightmare gone before state environmental agencies got involved. Denise looked 20 years older when she returned to my house for the final meeting. This time there were lawyers with her. Nobody smiled. Nobody threatened anything. They simply signed. Every condition, every payment, every exemption, full restoration agreement. I remember the funniest part clearly because exhaustion makes people weird. We finalized the paperwork inside the bathroom of a roadside hotel outside county limits since it was apparently the closest reliably functioning restroom left nearby. Denise signed the final page while somebody violently threw up in the next stall. You cannot write comedy better than real life sometimes. The county drilled my new well 2 months later. Hit cleaner water than before. They installed filtration worth more than my first house. And Silver Creek Estates? Oh, they recovered eventually. Rich neighborhoods always do. Fresh landscaping, new management company, rebranding campaign. But even now, years later, locals still joke about the summer of sewage. And every once in a while, when I drive past that subdivision entrance, I see people watering those perfect green lawns under giant stone signs talking about community harmony. And I can't help smiling a little. Because underneath all that polished suburban perfection runs a pipeline crossing one stubborn old man's pasture. You know, the older I get, the less this story feels like revenge, and the more it feels like a warning about what happens when people confuse authority with wisdom. Because honestly, none of this had to happen. If Denise or the HOA board had simply knocked on my door like decent human beings, if they'd treated me like a neighbor instead of an obstacle, we probably could have worked something out over coffee and a handshake. But power changes people, especially tiny amounts of power. Give somebody a title, a rule book, a few frightened residents backing them up, and suddenly they stop seeing other people as individuals. They start seeing violations, non-compliant properties, issues requiring enforcement. That's the psychological trap I mentioned earlier. Bureaucracy slowly strips empathy out of decision-making until destroying a family, while starts feeling like paperwork instead of violence. And the scary part is, it happens everywhere, not just HOAs. Corporations do it. Governments do it. Even regular people do it inside friend groups and families. Once someone believes they're morally justified for the greater good, they can rationalize almost anything. The lesson here is, systems matter, but relationships matter more. According to standard procedure, the HOA probably thought they were modernizing infrastructure and protecting property values. On paper, maybe it even sounded reasonable in some committee meeting with coffee and PowerPoint slides. But from a legal perspective, there's a massive difference between regulation and trespassing, between compliance and destruction. The moment they crossed onto private land and filled that well without due process, they stopped being administrators and became aggressors. And once people feel cornered, they stop reacting emotionally and start thinking strategically. That's where Denise made her biggest mistake. She assumed independence meant weakness. A lot of modern communities think that way now. They see self-sufficient people as outdated, stubborn, inconvenient. But dependence cuts both directions. The folks in Silver Creek depended completely on systems they never even thought about: water pressure, drainage, sewage pumps, electrical grids. Invisible comforts handled by people they ignored until something failed. Meanwhile, I spent my whole life learning how infrastructure actually works because country people don't get the luxury of pretending systems magically maintain themselves. When a pipe bursts out here, you fix it. When power goes out, you adapt. When water stops flowing, you survive long enough to figure out why. That mindset changes you. And maybe that's why this whole thing exploded the way it did. Two completely different worldviews collided. One side believed rules create order. The other believed resilience creates freedom. Somewhere in the middle sits the truth. Because if I'm being fair, yeah, I could have turned the pumps back on sooner. There were innocent families caught in the middle, kids included, and I still think about that sometimes. Anger always spreads farther than intended. But at the same time, people need consequences or arrogance just keeps growing unchecked. That's the uncomfortable reality nobody likes admitting. Sometimes the only thing powerful organizations understand is disruption. Not speeches, not complaints, consequences, real ones. And maybe that's why this story keeps spreading online years later, because deep down people are exhausted from feeling powerless against systems that seem untouchable. Everybody's dealt with some version of a Denise Holloway at least once. Somebody hiding control behind policy language while expecting total compliance. So when they hear about somebody finally pushing back, even in a messy, sarcastic, sewer-flooding kind of way, it feels satisfying, human, honest. But if there's one final lesson I'd leave you with, it's this. Never underestimate the quiet person maintaining the systems you rely on every day. The janitor, the utility worker, the mechanic, the old farmer outside town. Civilization looks permanent right up until the people holding it together decide they've had enough. And trust me, flushing toilets are a lot more fragile than most folks think. So what do you think? Did I go too far? Or did Silver Creek Estates get exactly what it earned? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare yourself, I want to hear that story too.